Hey, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Question Pro's Fireside Chat. I'm delighted to be joined by Kerry Sudale on this chat, which is, they're all about being an informal discussion with our clients, partners, subject matter experts to share ideas, thoughts, experiences, challenges, and best practices in CX research, data and insights. So I think this one could be quite an interesting one because it probably falls in the bucket of challenges for me. I know that I had a tough time last year in the CX recruitment market, and I've been in the industry for 20 years. So hopefully we'll get into a little bit of a sort of conversation about, what's the market looking like? What are some top tips and stuff from Kerry about what you can do if you're in CX and you're on the hunt for something new? But, I've known Kerry for a couple of years now. She is, as I said, a specialist recruiter in CX in the UK. She is really supportive to her clients, was a huge prop for me during a tough time last year. And so I really am delighted to have you on this morning, Kerry. Welcome.
Thank you. And I'll try not to be too offended that you got my name wrong, Nick.
I didn't get it wrong.
Sudale.
Struggling to speak a little bit, but
I'll forgive you.
It's Friday morning. Thank you for forgiving me. So let's jump into it. I think, Kerry, first thing I wanted to do was just give you the opportunity to tell us a little bit about your career so far and the decisions you made and what led you to sort of setting up your own recruitment business.
Well, thanks, Nick. Well, far be it from my youthful experience. I've actually got about 13 years, I think it is, in recruitment now. And about a decade of that was spent with Michael Page or Page Personnel or Page Group, whatever you might know them as. Started in sort of secretarial recruitment. And after I had my son, who is now 6 nearly,
Wow.
I moved into the world of leadership hiring in CX and contact center ops. So I had a great training ground over there, but I found that when I became a mum, the balance of working in recruitment was really tough. And I felt quite alone in that until I started speaking to some of the other mums and parents in general in leadership roles in CX and contact center. And they were having the exact same challenges as I was, and thought, well, actually, maybe there's a better way to amalgamate those two experiences of parents trying to work-life balance and try and start an agency that was focused on actually those that develop more inclusive hiring practices and were more inclusive to help people like me, like working parents, to fulfill their role both at home and at work. So Sudale Search was born.
Amazing. And I think it's interesting that it's customer experience that you specialize in. Customer experience and employee experience are so closely linked. And also I think you get a lot of that human connection in people that are in customer roles, so they're probably sort of quite drawn to that element of it as well.
Oh, definitely. And I think people tell you what they need, right? And in a recruitment process, people are, if you foster the right environment, they tell you exactly what they need as a recruiter. And so we can share with our customers exactly what people need. And I mean, you can't ignore working parents. They make up over 70%. I think it's 73% of the workforce in the UK. And if you are ignoring them when it comes to building your inclusive practices, your D&I strategy, you're missing out on a whole host of talent. And I think it's something like 45% in the 25 to 34 age group category who are parents. It's a key factor in determining what role they take next. And I think it was 93% of parents deem it very important or important when they're looking at a new opportunity to look at how supportive the business is of parents.
Wow. And it's probably, even more important now, isn't it? I mean, I sort of breezed through those years thinking that, I'll get another job if I need it. And, fortunately, my wife picked up a lot of the slack while I was out at work. But, in a challenging market, and I think, we both know at the minute that finding roles in customer experience has been tricky over the last few years. I mean, I've got my own experience of a 7-month job hunt last year, which, felt like it was going down to the wire before I landed up here at Question Pro. And it's challenging and frustrating all at the same time. I think, be interesting for people to hear from you kind of how you feel it is now. I've got last year as a comparison, but are things picking up? Is it better?
It's picking up, but when you see, if we were to take it as like a tap, instead of a leaky tap or an open tap full of opportunities coming through, it's a very drippy tap at this moment in time. But I think, actually, although there's less opportunities coming out at the minute, I actually think there's a lot of really interesting ones when they do come out, when they are hitting the market. It's those SME disruptors that are doing really well. Say hi to Paddy, who's just popped up behind. He never behaves.
Hey,
I'm hoping no one walks past. So I think the opportunities are really interesting, but I think that means that a lot more people are going for them. So you want to make yourself stand out in the best way possible when you go for them. And I mean, Nick, because you went for some amazing opportunities as well, didn't you, when you were looking? And it's just that view of, you're great, the opportunity is amazing. You've got to think about the other people involved in the process as well. There are going to be some really strong people and strong competition against you, but you kind of have just got to think about yourself and what you bring to the table. And starting at that, actually at senior leadership level, the weakness that a lot of people have actually is in that first stage is the CV, actually crafting together a really decent, compelling CV. Because they can all look the same, but if you overcomplicate it, it makes them really difficult to read. So that first stage, you really need to think about when you're thinking, hey, I'm going to tackle the market right now.
Yeah, and I was going to say that when you sort of mentioned the drippy tap. I think, that is exactly it. You see a great role, you think, oh, that's perfect. And then you're like, crikey, you see on LinkedIn like 750 applications, and it's either a bit daunting or you go, right, how am I going to stand out in this crowd? What is it that I can bring to it? And I think, I tend to agree with you. I always felt if I could get in a conversation, I'll probably come across quite well. But I was always a bit tentative on, well, is this CV, is this cover letter go, or is this application form going to allow me to sort of show off what I feel I can bring to this role to the best of my abilities? And I think that leads us nicely into, if getting your CV right, getting how you stand out is a sort of first tip. What other tips have you got for people looking for CX leadership roles, whatever, in the market? There he goes, Paddy. He's seen something outside. What sort of other tips have you got that people might be interested to hear?
Well, I think, first of all, if we revisit back on the CV and just a couple of the things that you said there, because actually LinkedIn do overinflate the number of applications. Because
really?
My understanding is, and we've had this sort of conversations, is if people are hovering over it for a long period of time, it can sometimes come up as listing them as over 100 applications. And then if you click on it, it'll say like 70. But of that percentage of applications, you've got to figure that some will test the waters, throw their hat in the ring and apply for a job role that's not really a great fit. But I think if you revisit the CV, and a lot of people tell you to tailor. Some people say ignore the tailoring of the CV because it's not important, but actually it's just tweaking it, not completely rewriting it. It'll be some of the things that you choose as some of your key achievements. Like for you, Nick, I would hope that you'd had a lot of key achievements over the past 20 years, some stuff that you're proud of, but it's tailoring it to that particular role. So if you're looking at things like voice analytics, for example, and that's a big part of that role is implementing voice analytics, then if you've done that, you want to list that as one of your key achievements because it's one of the big things in the role.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that first sift, it might be done by in-house HR talent that maybe have not recruited in the CX space before. So sometimes writing that CV, missing off things that you might think are simple. If they're listed in the must-have requirements, make sure they're listed in the CV, because otherwise you won't make it to the hiring manager in some cases. So that'll be that first step. And then what did you ask me again? What would be the next thing? Would be
sort of other tips beyond that, sort of, right, when that's hopefully helping crack the first stage. What other sort of just general tips around in a difficult marketplace? Is it networking? Is it, making sure you're sort of constantly active? I mean, I remember thinking, God, am I doing enough every day to make sure that, I'm finding something so I could at least feel comfortable? And it becomes quite daunting and quite challenging.
Well, your job search becomes your job, right? And for that brief spell of time. And you've got to think about it of, in your normal working day, would you sit at your computer all day, every day, doing some of the admin tasks, maybe some... Sorry about this. There is actually somebody just having a chat outside, which never happens, and he's wanting to speak to the people having a chat outside.
Having a chat here, but he's joining in on this one as well.
Outside my house, go away. So I think networking is a hugely valuable use of your time. And I think one of the things that people always think about in terms of networking, like, you don't want to be doing it all day, every day, because again, in your job role, you network in general, but you don't want to be doing it all day, every day and make it a waste of time. But also when you're networking, it's kind of, those events that you go to, and sometimes people just want to sell to you straight away at the networking event. They want to come up to you and say, hey, I'm a marketer, this is what I do, or hey, I'm a recruiter, this is what I do, kind of pitch slap you and move on. You need to add value to your network as much as possible. And you remember when you're looking for a role, there's a lot of value that you can bring and things that you'll have done before. So even things like supporting the awards programs and stuff, sitting on the judging panels, you're networking and you're bringing value to a network, but you're also keeping your finger on the pulse in terms of what's going on in the industry. What have you been up to in the 7 months that you've been off? You don't really want to be saying, well, all I've done is sitting and applying for roles. You want to show that you've kept your skin in the game to a certain extent, because that networking comes back around. And especially with people you've worked with before, Nick, as you know, like, if you reach out to people that you've worked with before, they're the most likely ones that if something comes across their lap or they decide that they need to hire, they can go, oh, well, I know Nick. Let's put something together for Nick. So revisit your current network, go back through those, but also when you're reaching out to new people, make sure that it's still that sort of two-way relationship, as I always think, because if I reach out to any customers saying, hey, I want you to use me for your hiring needs, come to me, I'll go away. I'll get flat out ignored. You need to give somebody value to bring that back. And I think sometimes people can be scared and worried, especially in redundancy scenarios, and they start to question what their own value is. And you're like, hey, hang on, you've not lost 20 years worth of value because your role was made redundant.
Yeah. And then that is really hard sometimes, isn't it? And I think, you do forget that, well, what can I bring to each and every conversation I'm having, because you're so focused on that one goal because of how emotionally attached you are to. I love that tip about, looking at the awards, looking some of the sort of networks out there. Bring it back to the D&I piece. I imagine Women in CX is a fantastic network.
Yeah.
For people. We've got the CX Games kicking off today, I see. Yeah. And the judging is again a great opportunity. I think you said yesterday when we were talking that you had a candidate who went and did some judging to sort of almost just grow his network and ended up landing a role out of it. So it does work, I think.
Well, this is it. And it's the value of, again, when you're working with a recruiter, sometimes, especially in a market like the current one. I mean, let's not pretend the economic situation does not look particularly attractive. And I think everybody knows, you can see how many jobs are out there in the market at any given time. And it's sort of not a lot. It's better than last year, and it is increasing. But it's an election year and all of the other stuff. You kind of expect that to happen. But I think if you work with a recruiter, there's lots of different things. Like there's some recruiters or consultants that won't help you out in terms of interview prep or giving you hints and tips on your CVs. And there are some that will. Don't chase the ones that won't. Ask the ones that will at that particular time, or they'll be able to refer you, or even find out through LinkedIn if anyone's happy to give you any hints and tips. I mean, there are a lot of people that were out of work last year that have found their way into new roles, and those kind of people will want to give back.
A lot of lived experience that they want to give back and help.
The lived experience, because I think sometimes people who say, oh, it's really, really easy, or I drifted into this, it can make you feel really not great in terms of that way. And I think sometimes people understanding that it is tough out there, but it's not an insurmountable. It's not terrible. You will secure your next opportunity, but it's making sure that you're shopping in the right places, doing the right things. And I think that was the thing with the judging panel. It was one of my customers, and the guy had put out a thing saying, hey, anybody in CX or customer ops, we've had a couple of judging places open up. Someone had dropped out. I think they were not very well or something. And we just tagged them in. One of them went ahead, did it, a free couple of hours days work, and I think that's where he got one of his contracts from, actually, because he met somebody along the way and they said, oh, you're available of a contract, because let's face it, you'll apply to each other on LinkedIn, and I think people have their own views about the green banner, but if you've spoken to someone, you think they're great and you go, oh, look, they are open to work, great, I've got an opportunity that I can discuss with them.
And what about the famous green banner? I know I discussed this with you a bit last year, and it's sort of, there's the view of, well, does it make me look desperate? Does it? But it feels like, it is just a sign to say, hey, if you stop and reflect on it, it just is that, I am available. And if you overcomplicate it with emotional reactions, you can sort of do yourself a disservice. I guess some thoughts on that, and then that might take us into kind of a little behind the curtain peek from your side of, what does a sort of recruitment process actually look like, or what's good, what's bad behind the scenes from your experiences?
Definitely. And I think the green banner, well, read into this what you will. So I have a recruiter license on LinkedIn, and a lot of recruiters will have a recruiter or a recruiter like, or a more enhanced version of LinkedIn, essentially. And when we're looking for work, the first thing, when we're looking for somebody for one of our roles and we'll run a search, you can have an open to work in the background that signals to recruiters or those using the recruiter platform on LinkedIn that you are open to work. And that is a direct signal that you will respond to our outreach, or are more likely to respond to our outreach. Now, it works really well for people who are employed and maybe open to a new opportunity. Some people leave it open to an opportunity all the time, because once you get to a certain level, you probably are always kind of open if
the right thing comes along.
If the right thing comes along. So it's signaling basically that you're happy for people to reach out to you. And think about it, that green banner, in-house talent teams or people that may not have the recruiter license. There are office managers that may be running recruitment processes internally. You, if you were in your role and you're thinking, hey, I'm looking for a CX manager, if you see you haven't got that recruiter license, you don't see the hidden open to work people. So you think you run a search, who you're probably going to click on, the ones that are green bannered, open to work, most likely to respond, especially if you've got an urgent role. Because I think people lord up this idea that the best person looking for your opportunity is going to be currently employed. And, sometimes that is true, but it's not because they're employed, it's because there's a niche skill set and those that have that skill set are currently in role. But at the same time, especially in the market of what happened last year, there were people with niches where their roles were made redundant. So it doesn't change whether your role was made redundant or you're currently enrolled. The skill set's still the same. So for any given skill set, the immediately available person who is open to work may well be the best person for your role. They might be employed the best person for your role, but you would still look at both.
Yes.
Especially when working with a recruiter, which probably takes us nicely into the next question.
Into the next bit. And I guess sort of some of the thoughts in my head is like, what can you expect? What sort of, length of process might you have? I think I was speaking to you last year when I, over 3 months, had 7 interviews, ending up with a coffee with the CEO. Ended up not getting it because maybe succession planning was like, or this role could become this, which I wasn't. And you're so invested in these things, but are there sort of rules of thumb that you think are good or best practice, or sort of how do you think about it as a recruiter and advising people how they run their processes?
Well, I think when I work with somebody, I want to get under the skin of everything if I'm hiring with them, and I want to be able to give them an end-to-end brief of one of the earliest questions, that what's the succession plan for this role? Because when you're hiring in leadership, that's generally what people want to know, right? If there is one, if there isn't one, or what the plan would be, whether it's self-created or there's a path already there. But I would say for companies that aren't partnered with anybody, you will see the difference, because you will kind of see the internal talent partner or HR person that you'll be talking to. They should be able to answer all of those questions in a first stage interview. I would always advice to anybody that a first stage interview with HR or recruitment is a 50-50 platform. I think too often it's assumed that if you're open to work or immediately available, that you will consider anything, or that you as the company hold all the cards and you have the power to sort of delay, or you can take as long as you want. And actually that's just not the case, because an in-demand skill set, whether the person's immediately available or not, is still an in-demand skill set. So for example, I was working with a CX director in the Midlands, and she was amazing. And as they say, like buses or like trains, you're waiting for a while and they all come along at once. She had 2 opportunities that came across at the same time. Company role 1 was her favorite position. It offered more money. The scope of the position was really good. The other one, still equally good in certain ways, but the early doors signs were really positive from role 1. But as she went through the interview processes, role 2 became her favorite. And there was one particular point, I think after the second stage interview, where the second company said, right, come in, have a third stage interview, which was just a meet and greet, meet the team, all of that sort of stuff. The only person going in, and they offered her the role. She'd been chasing company 1 for a little while to see, why not? Let's get 2 final stage interviews so you get to compare and contrast. She accepted the other role. By the time the other one came back and was like, meet our chief customer officer. it's likely that you're going to get this job role. Like, and they were really excited about the fact that she was going to get this job role. And she was like, I'm starting a new role on Monday. Like, you might think you hold all of the cards, but in-demand talent is still in-demand talent. And if you get somebody at a final stage interview, if you get the company that moves quickly, keeps you informed of the process, because you know what, company one could have still saved it, because actually if they'd have responded to her comms, it would have been, hey, you're actually the preferred person, this person's away on holiday, whatever it might be. And she can sort of manage the expectations from there. But to ghost somebody in the middle of an application process is a big no-no, and it's the biggest turn off for anybody, if I'm honest. And like you, getting to a final stage interview of 7 stages, like sometimes the gall of going, you know, well, we don't think you're the next CEO or whatever, and you go, oh, didn't know that.
Why do I?
Didn't think that's what I was going for.
Not sure I would have applied for that. Yeah,
exactly. And I think it would have been a weird development plan, actually, to be fair, from what the role was. But it's interesting. But I think companies just need to have a really clear idea about all of those things and share it with people up front, share timelines up front. And for the love of God, don't ghost people. I think that's the thing. Like, we have so many things at our disposal now in terms of WhatsApp, LinkedIn messaging, anything like that. And that's sometimes where I'm busy on roles and I'm busy in sourcing mode or whatever, and I'll speak to people that align well with the roles or whatever as the peek behind the curtain. But there's always another thing as well, because sometimes speculative candidates come to me, and sometimes I can take them on, help them with CV prep or whatever. And sometimes I have to kind of delay it and say, listen, I can't right now, because there's a priority for everybody. And priority one is looking after the needs of your customers in terms of your sourcing and their hiring. And as part of that big priority one, my first priority always is feedback. You have to give feedback, positive, negative, whatever it is. No news is still news, because they know that you're on it and chasing for it. And I think you said the same, Nick. You were like, right, well, I know the next time for when I'm hiring, and I think other people had the same thing, I am going to make sure that I always prioritize that feedback on CVs and
that's
and
a definite thing.
Yeah.
You know, working in a really busy leadership role in a big organization, you know, you've got to recruit, but you've got your day-to-day going on with like one person down, hence you're recruiting, and it becomes like, oh, I know I've got to do it, but it's, sort of turn that tap off and just get it done and really be on top of it. And I think it's easy to forget the other side when you are so focused in your day-to-day, and you know, keeping that human connection is so important, isn't it? I just wanted to sort of,
and I think as well, there's certain bits where in certain positions, you probably, if you were in a permanent full-time role and they were still after your experience, you would have gone, no way, I'm going to sack this off, because it's not working for me in terms of the process. And that's the reality, especially when you're looking for a niche. You might have 1 or 2 people are available, but they're actively interviewing. They could get offered elsewhere. If you've got other people who don't actively need to move, and they get a peek behind the curtain into your employee experience, which the candidate experience is a direct indicator of, they're going to go, no, thank you, I don't want to work for you.
Yeah. And that niche subject has come up a couple of times. I guess CX is so wide, right? And it means different things to different organizations, to different people within organizations, to different people who are applying. Are you sort of seeing any particular types of roles that are coming up more that we could, you know, give a few sort of hints to people that might be looking on right now? Sort of, is there anything hot at the minute? I guess AI probably comes into it a bit, but it seems to be everywhere. But
I was going to say everybody is looking at the AI piece, but I think finally, certain organizations have done it really well, but they're thinking, actually, what I hate referring to it, human capital alongside the AI and how to make it work, because AI is all well and good. from what I hear from the experts in the field and dealing with certain basics, as long as you've got the guardrails up correctly, you've got the right controls in place, it works to a certain point. But there is a point where your customers want to talk to people, and that is sometimes in the moments that matter, and whether that's in insurance and it's a claims, or you're banking and someone's got hold of your bank card or whatever and been touch spending everywhere. You probably want to speak to a human. And I think it's the most in-demand skill set at this moment in time are leaders who have balanced those two things and are led slightly by intuition. They make good decisions based on what they know and what they feel, but actually it's the data. What are the customers actually telling you? And I think somebody in my network posted something about, you understand the drop, not necessarily the ocean. Try and understand the ocean. And she uses that as her CX. Shout out to you, Jeanette. And I think it's that piece, isn't it? The understanding the whole thing. Don't go down the customer path that is one little tiny dot, but how can you understand the wider and fuller picture? And actually, that's still the skill set, that balance of good intuition, leadership, emotional intelligence is a big one. And it's actually more around what people are looking for now when they're hiring leaders, thinking what amount of emotional intelligence have people got, so that when they're running through these transformation programs, they can take the team on that journey with them.
Fascinating. I think, as I expected, because I know that we both love to talk, we are at the end very quickly of the session. Kerry, thank you so much. I love the tips. Paddy, thank you so much as well.
Do you know what? Everybody I've got a husky and he's nice and quiet. And I said, a border terrier, we'll get a little dog. It'll cause me less trouble. Man, they are hard work.
Man, they are hard work. But I love the tips. I hope they've been useful for our listeners. I think summarizing, don't forget what you're good at. Do tailor stuff, but don't sweat it. Network, but add value when you're networking. Remember, it's a 50-50 process. Look for clarity in the timelines. And above all, as we kind of said at the beginning, the human experience of it all in recruitment is so important. So thank you so much, Kerry. Really enjoyed the conversation, and thank you for those listening. Do look out for our next fireside chat on Friday the 7th of June with Leah Ben Nasser of Money and Mental Health and Elena Sandhu from Question Pro. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. See you later. Bye-bye.